Abigail. First in this morning, you get the gold star. We've managed to change our tickets again to October. It's twice we've done it. We're not allowed to do it at all, so fantastic. For no more than the administrative fee this time. Isn't that great? Morning, Pat. You are Lord. You are Lord of this day. You are Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of all, Lord of the past and the future. Morning, Heather. And you hold this day. You hold this day in your hand. You created morning for me to rise up and worship. Alpha, 24, and Omega, the beginning and the end of all things. Jesus, at your name every knee shall bow during this day. And every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus Christ is Lord. We rise to worship, to magnify and exalt your name, King of Kings. Lord of Lords. I was thinking this morning, looking out the window, beautiful blue sky this morning again, and I can see lots of trees outside of here, and then the main road runs just beneath me as I look out the window. Looking at the sky is beautiful. I mean, who could possibly have made such a thing? I couldn't make such a thing. And it's so vast and huge, and on it goes and everything. It reflects the Lord's glory. But the Lord has been waiting not for the sky to worship him, or the trees, or the rest of it. He's been waiting for us to come and worship him, because then creation is complete. We complete the morning worship before the Lord. He loves the birds and the trees and all that stuff, and it's very much the Celtic stream, isn't it? All creation rises up to praise God, and all creation is waiting, however, for the sons of God to worship. And as we worship, we complete the whole purpose of creation, made to worship him, but incomplete until the ones who are at the top. We worship you, everlasting. We worship you, Lord of all. We worship you. We worship you. I want my worship to rise up like smoke before the throne of God. I want it to rise up and mix with this glory of the earthly place and exalt him. I want to be at one with his creation, but I am the crown of it, and when I worship, everything is completed. And the Lord's been waiting for Abigail, Pat, David, Heather, Paul, and one or two others that haven't registered, waiting for us to rise up to worship him. And then he says to the Father in heaven, now my creation is complete. I'm feeling that very much this morning. I'm rising up, Lord, in your glory. Let my praises rise like incense before your throne. I was made to worship you. I was made to worship you, Lord. Let my worship rise up like incense before your throne. I was made to worship you. I was made to kneel at your throne in adoration, to worship you. to worship you. To worship you, Lord. You are Alpha and Omega. You are more beautiful than the sky outside my window. I worship you, rising up before your throne. I worship you. I worship you, rising up to worship you. You're so beautiful, so very beautiful. You are beautiful, so very beautiful. And in your light, I am beautiful too. Beautiful, so very beautiful is the Lord, and in His light I am beautiful. I am beautiful. I am beautiful. Abigail, you're beautiful. Pat, David, Heather, Paul, beautiful. Mary, beautiful. You know, the wonderful thing about worship is that you begin to realize how beautiful you are. Because in worship, the inner person, the one we really are, our inner emotional personality that we really are, is as beautiful as the day the Lord made it all those centuries ago when we were conceived in the heart of God. And when we worship, slowly, as we keep going, the physical falls away and the spiritual takes the precedence. And when we stand in His beauty, and when we look at His beauty, and when we worship Him for His beauty, in that light, we're beautiful too. And we see our beauty. And that's why worship is so strengthening to the human spirit, to the spirit. It breaks away from humanity and reminds us what we really are. and how beautiful we are, and how lovely we are, and special we are. And we come back, of course, and we have to put up with the old broken body. Morning, Margaret. I think I sensed you arriving there. I looked down. We have to return to the human body. After all, we have to live in it. But that's why worship is so special. It reminds us how beautiful we are. As we kneel in his presence, as we worship in his presence, and we look at his beauty, which is something I always find in worship. It's usually my way into worship. I look down and I go, wow, you know what? I'm pretty beautiful too. You know, I'm not wearing glasses and limping around like an old wheelbarrow, you know, or struggling with financial problems or issues or the rest of it. They don't seem to matter anymore. In the light of his beauty, I am beautiful. And that's why when you leave the worship environment, you always feel better. And I love the praise environment. As you know, usually we praise here, but worship is where it's at. This is where we offer to him our servant honour, as it were, and he in return shows us how beautiful we are. Yeah, we are. Yeah, what's Abigail say? Yes, in worship we are revealed. That's true. And that's why it's so uplifting. And that's why I can't stand it in Africa when we get rumsha all the time and lots of shouting. Well, I can stand it, but I never get, because the thing about worship, and I'm fairly convinced of this, is that it has to be still. It's a stillness experience. It slowly calms all that we do, and so we can stand in quiet before the Lord and then see him and he see us. And worship is a very gently burning flame, easily put out, and that's why worship comes under attack so much, you know, in our 21st century. We don't know how to be still. Went to the gym last week. They were playing this awful row. I went out and I said to the lady at the desk, who are you playing this for? She said, oh, we're playing it for the customers. So I'm the only customer here. I don't like it, so turn it off. I don't need noise. I need to worship quietly and still. And pure worship will always finish up quiet. We don't have the time on a Sunday morning here, nor here this morning, to go further and further, but eventually, you know, you go from words and singing to just maybe playing to nothing. And it's in that silent nothingness that we really appreciate who he is and who we are. That's the pattern, I think, of pure worship. Can start off singing, but slowly, I mean, on a Sunday morning I begin to run out of words, so it should be. I mean, after all, what do I need to say? You know, what do I need to say? I love you, and that's it. And in return, for getting there, for getting to that point, to offering that worship, that pure worship, in return, I realise I'm beautiful too. Not a bad payback, is it, for worship? And that's what I seek after every Sunday morning. I'm seeking after that moment of quiet, which means that all is well. And I felt that this morning when I got up, just felt, you know, this is what I'm going to do this morning, and that's what I'm doing. And I feel it. So really what we should do now is sit quietly for the next whatever minutes, but we won't. But, you know, that's what it is. Jericho. A bit of a problem for Joshua. He had come through a lot, this man. He'd come through the wilderness. He'd come from Egypt. He'd seen the Red Sea. He'd seen the people reject the promise. He'd seen the 40 years in the wilderness. He'd seen the people that rejected the promise die. Warning that to us. He came to the promised land. Moses died. Now he's number one. He's struggling with that. In his call in Joshua 1, 3 times the Lord says, I am with you. We must get the message that Joshua feels very much on his own. Then he finds the courage to cross the Jordan, and then there's Jericho. Jericho, a very strong stronghold, not necessarily that big. Cities weren't that big in those days. I don't know, sort of size of Wembley, probably a bit more, but they weren't that big. But this one was strong and powerful, and was saying quite clearly to Joshua, you are not going to pass this way. Satan had built a strong place in Jericho. He'd made it a stronghold to obstruct God's people. That was his purpose. It was shut up. It was well defended. And this army of Israel, a rabble. They weren't soldiers. They were rabble. They were civilians. They could fight, but they had no idea of strategy. They didn't know how to bring down walls or besiege stuff. They didn't know that. I don't know that either. I could pick up a gun and shoot, fine, but strategy, no, I'm not trained for that. They weren't trained. They faced this massive obstacle, really. How are they going to overcome it? How do we overcome the Jerichos that face us in our life, big or small? Well, I suppose there are a number of choices. The first is he could have got together the ones that could fight and attacked it. I don't know how he would have thought he'd have got through, but I suppose he'd have tried to scale the walls. I don't know. And eventually, if he kept on losing men, eventually some would get over the top. That's one way sieges are overcome. Babylon fell because the Persians lowered the level of the river on which Babylon stood so low they could get under the foundations. So there you go. So there are ways of doing these things, but that would have caused a lot of loss of life. Israel took the loss of its citizens very, very seriously. They always have, and they still do. So that isn't going to work. I suppose he could build some sort of siege engine, but he didn't have the skills. He'd never seen that. I suppose he could have besieged the city and starved it out, but that would have taken years and years, and probably most of his people were starved as well. There didn't seem to be a sensible way forward. What to do? How to bring down Jericho? How to bring down the greatest strongholds that face us in our lives? How to bring down the stronghold in Ghana? How to bring down the stronghold in England? How to bring down the strongholds the enemy has built in our path? That was Jericho's problem. That was Joshua's problem. How am I going to do this? I have a promise. This is my land, and I've got to take it. So I don't have any option, but how will this city fall? Is it going to be the ways of the world or the ways of God? Joshua chose the way of the servant. God said to him, this is what you're going to do, right? This is what you're going to do. You're going to get the priests and the trumpet and the ark and everything, and you're going to march around it once. All the people. Now, there are a lot of people, so that was quite a lot of people. Every chance to believe that the first ones going round, the second ones were still coming, because there were a lot of them, and it wasn't that big a city. You're going to march around it like that, and the trumpeters are going to sound the trumpet, and the ark's going to go ahead of you, and all that sort of stuff, and the people are going to march behind you. You do that once on, let's say, I don't know, Monday, whatever. And then you're going to come back to your camp, and on Tuesday you can do the same. You're going to get the trumpeters together and the ark and all the rest of it. Off you go. You're going to march around it. Morning, Sandra. You're going to march around it once. And you can do that for 6 days. And on the 7th day, you're going to march around 7 times, and then you're going to blow the trumpet, and the people are going to shout, and the wall's going to fall down, job done. Now that is a crazy strategy. I mean, how is that going to bring down Jericho? Doesn't seem likely, does it? I mean, it was probably quite an impressive sight, but the people inside Jericho were strong and able and resisting and everything, so really, march around 100 times if you like. What difference does it make? It seemed an odd strategy. March around once every day and march down 7 times on the last day, and that'll do the job. So there we are. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord of the covenant followed them. The armed guards marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. Da-di-da-di-da. There you go. 6 times they did that. On the 7th day, they went round, and when the trumpet sounded, the people were to shout. Here we go, verse 16. The 7th time round, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Shout. Oh gosh, that's going to do a big job, isn't it? Shout. What about fight? No, shout. The people shouted, and we read here, and when the trumpet sounded, the walls fell down. The walls collapsed, and everybody charged into the city and took it. Now, Joshua chose the way of the servant to bring down Jericho. He did not choose the ways of the world. The people must have thought he'd been out in the sun too much for this ridiculous strategy. But this was the Lord's command to him. This was the Lord's command to him. This, Joshua, is how you're going to do it. Joshua had to choose between the ways of the world. He had some fighting men. He had plenty of men. They could have had a training session. I mean, he could have sorted that out. And then he could have said, right, we're going to break up into little squadrons and we're going to attack this wall and this wall. We're going to try to scale. Or he could say, we're going to march around it once, and on the seventh day we're going to march around 7 times, and then we're going to shout and the wall's going to fall down. The ways of the world or the ways of the servant? Which is he going to choose? He chose the way of the servant. And the way of the servant brought Jericho down. The way of the servant brought Jericho down. The way of the servant brought Jericho down. I'm sure Satan couldn't understand it. You know, he's violent, vicious, fighting's what he wants. Kill hundreds of Israelites would be just the job for him. But the way of the servant, he couldn't cope with. He didn't know what to do. He had no idea, and he still hasn't. That's why he couldn't defeat Jesus, because he couldn't work it out. This man is all powerful. Why doesn't he come conquering? Why doesn't he come this, that, and the other? Why doesn't he just take Jerusalem and kick out the Romans? And why do you do that? Because that's what Satan does: violence and fear. Jesus came as a servant, and the enemy didn't know what to do about it. And the Lord brought him down. Being found in human likeness, he did not see a quality, a thing to be grasped, but taking on the form of a servant, he emptied himself and was obedient unto death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him. Satan cannot cope with servants. It's beyond him. He wants to fight, manipulate, cheat, lie, steal, and servants turn their back on him and say to the master, what do you want me to do? And in the light of that, Jericho fell. It couldn't stand against the servant heart. Satan had no strategy for it. Because you see, Satan likes to move and manipulate with pride and self and all those things. And the servant has none of those. The servant doesn't do self. Does the servant at the end of the day come in and say to the master, first I'll get my tea, then I'll cook yours? No. First he cooks his master's tea, and then he cooks his own. And he says at the end of the day, I am only the Lord's servant. I've only done my duty. The servant looks to the master, not to the problem, and says to the master, how would you have me serve in the face of Jericho's obstruction? What would you have me do? And the Lord said to the servant, you will do this for 6 days, and this on the 7th, and this will bring down the city. And it did. The way of the servant is deceptive. People think servants are nothing people. They think that Christians are nothing people, that we're nobodies, that we haven't got anything, that we're nothing. We have the greatest power in the world. We have the power of the servant. So when you face your Jericho, as we did yesterday, trying to persuade our airline to change our tickets for virtually nothing, as opposed to the £3,000 they wanted, we looked to the Lord and we said, if you want your servants to go to Ghana, then this has to be sorted. And we don't know how you can do it, but you can do it. And David Smith took on our agents and KLM and won. The way of the servant will always win. Face your Jericho with the heart of a servant. Don't look to Jericho. Look to the master and say, what would you have me do, master? And he would tell you what he wants you to do. And Jericho will fall. And every Jericho will fall because it cannot cope with a servant heart. So there's a lot to think about this morning, and our time's up. Well, I did worship on a bit this morning. I would have worshipped all the time actually, but you know, I wanted to talk about Jericho. So whatever Jericho you're facing today, you know, turn your back on it. Turn to the Lord and say, Master, what would you have me do? And the Master will tell you, and then you do it. And if yesterday we hadn't been able to get our tickets sorted, we weren't going to pay all that extra money, we couldn't afford it, we wouldn't have come, and I'd have said, Master, your servant cannot go to Ghana. What would you have me do? On this occasion the Lord said, no, my servant will go to Ghana, I'll deal with them, don't worry, I'll deal with them. And he did. Jericho your Jericho will fall as long as you look to the Master as a servant and say, what would you have me do? Well, that's good, isn't it? That's very good. Praise God. Good last night, looking at Genesis. And tonight, once our forefathers were kicked out of Eden for their disobedience and rebellion, what happened? What didn't happen? And what did happen? We're going to look at Cain and Abel tonight. So hope to see you there. 2000 BST, 1900 Ghana time. And look forward to seeing you there. So thanks for joining me today. Now it's Facebook time. So I'm going to switch over to Facebook now. If you're on YouTube and you're not in the Facebook family, stay on and enjoy our Facebook family. Can I just keep encouraging you, if you're a part of our Sunday morning Grace Fellowship, Grace Church, please register on our WhatsApp so I can post links to you and not have to post them across so many WhatsApp channels. We're trying to help ourselves be a bit more organised here. Okay, good, lovely. See you in some of you in a little while, and some of you tonight, some of you tomorrow. God bless.